Hello there. This is Pastors of the Round Table, the discipleship podcast of Monroe Missionary Baptist Church. It's brought to you by Together in Christ. You guys were on a live mic at that moment. Little did you know.
Scott's just drinking something that a few days ago he came to my office and he said, "These are disgusting."
Yeah.
And he's drinking another one.
I'm going to be honest, that's how most new flavors of LaCroix go that I try. It's like, well, this is what I got, so I better like it.
Yeah, so you're enjoying it.
Yeah, it's mojito. Mojito flavored. Non-alcoholic. It's mojito.
Straight carbonated water.
What is the flavor of mojito? Is it like cucumber?
It looks like it's lime and mint.
Oh, boy.
That's what it looks like on the front of it, but it looks very tropical. It is very deceptive. I do not feel like I'm on a beach.
What's that drink at the Kentucky Derby? A mint julep? Isn't that lime and mint? Or no, is it? I know it's a mint.
It's mint. I don't know. I've never had one.
That's coming up soon, isn't it?
I think so. Scott should know.
It's very soon. Beginning of May.
Yeah.
Yep. We need to have a derby party.
Okay.
We make derby pie.
What is that?
Okay, I remember we talked about
derby
this.
pie. Yeah.
What is it?
Does it involve tater tots?
No, but that would be delicious.
It's cheese and tater tots
and chili
with cinnamon chili on top.
I think I can check, but I believe it's usually like the first weekend in May. Usually is when the derby is or something.
Yeah,
like
it's
that.
pretty soon. I saw it advertised online.
Mm-hmm. No,
there should be horse meat in derby pie.
No, it's similar to pecan pie, but you use walnuts and you use chocolate. You put chocolate in it
so
too.
it's like a sweet thing. Okay.
Yeah. If you like pecan pie, you would like derby pie.
I do like pecan pie.
Do people eat derby pie outside of derby season?
No.
It's just
really.
like...
Okay. Not really. Not even a ton of people in Kentucky eat derby pie. But we do.
Huh.
We had a big derby party every year. At my aunt's house, they had a big pond, and we would go swimming every year. It'd be freezing, but we'd do it.
To watch a...
Where's the Kentucky Derby held?
Kentucky.
At Churchill Downs in Louisville. Churchill Downs in Louisville.
You officially know more about horse racing than almost any other.
He does. He knows a lot about horse racing. In this, he knows about the Kentucky Derby.
About horse racing.
Can you name the other two? What are they? What are the other two major races?
Yeah, the Triple Crown. In order to get the Triple Crown in horse racing,
the Belmont Stakes.
Well done.
And I don't remember the other one.
Preakness.
The Preakness. Yeah.
Yeah.
See, you don't really have to know about horse racing. You just have to watch. What's the movie called? It's not
Secretariat.
Secretariat. You just have to watch Secretariat.
I've never seen that.
It's a good movie, actually.
It actually is. I remember. You're going to think this is dumb. You remember when ESPN used to do the Sports Century documentaries? There was like their documentary about famous athletes.
No, I don't remember that.
Yeah, they had one on Secretariat.
They did.
That's why I won't watch the movie.
I kind of got a little emotional watching.
A horse isn't an athlete.
That's bull.
A horse is not an athlete. Humans are athletes, not horses.
Okay.
Humans are athletes. I'm not saying the jockey on top is the athlete, but a horse isn't an athlete.
Okay, so you need to watch this though, because I think I know it's dumb, but it's like the horse.
I'm not watching it.
The horse,
roided up horse, a roided up horse.
No, he wasn't. It was just in the 70s.
They're all roided up.
There's no
in the
roids.
70s.
That's how they get them so big and fast.
There's no roids. No, they don't.
It's. I'll tell you what.
You cannot call a horse an athlete.
Okay, yeah, because humans don't roid up, do they? They don't roid up at all.
It's a human.
It's okay if a human roids up, and they're an athlete still.
So if cockfighting ever got to be a big thing in America, all of a sudden chickens are athletes?
Kentucky and Missouri, we do that all the time. What are you talking about?
So you have chicken athletes? This is the best one ever? No.
We should.
It's an animal.
So are you like I think I actually agree with you. It's not an athlete, but you still just refuse because you just don't want to be impressed by what an animal can
do? Because
do?
ESPN labeled it. They did like the best 100 athletes of all time. Secretariat was in there. With Michael Jordan, with Muhammad Ali, and Secretariat. That's just not.
He was awesome.
Appropriate. That's not right.
He was awesome.
I mean, I think it is. That's pretty cool.
No.
Let me ask you this: have you ever read C.S. Lewis? Because horses talk in the book, The Chronicles of Narnia.
It's also fantasy.
I don't know.
Isn't there also like half man, half goat in it?
Mr. Tumnus.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
he's a fawn.
A fawn. There's
a fawn. Yeah.
Yeah. No. Anyway, it was a moving documentary because that horse could fly.
It seriously is a good movie. I think you'd like it. Get over your pride, Tim.
It's not my pride.
It's
so everybody listening. I'm curious though, because you guys would get together. See, like we get together. Like I understand, like a Super Bowl party or like March Madness or the NFL draft. Like hours of TV watching, like the thing's on for a while. But the Kentucky Derby is like what, a minute and a half?
3 minutes, I think. Yeah.
It's more than that though. It's not just the race. That in Louisville, there's actually the Kentucky Derby Festival, which is months long.
Months?
Well, it's like has a long string of events that are all happening. So like there's another event called Thunder over Louisville.
Yeah.
Which is like the largest.
That just happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It kicks it off. It kicks off the Derby season. And so it's
airplanes and stuff.
Okay. Well, there's an air show with it, but it's also like, at least it used to be. I don't know if it still is, but it used to be the largest fireworks show in North America, and or maybe even the world, like second to one in China. But it's probably not the biggest anymore. But it's like it's a big deal. It happens every single year. We would go every year. Sometimes we'd camp out.
But I mean, you would go to your aunt's house. You said though for the party.
Yeah, for the Derby party.
It's on TV for like 4 hours.
Well, I mean, yeah,
and you never know. There's lots of races happening, but there's only one Derby.
Yeah, they don't always show all the races. I'm kind of with you, Spencer. It's like, what time's the race start?
Well, I guess I'm thinking about it. Not if I'm in Louisville, that's one thing, but I'm talking about like having a party.
Oh, there's people here that we know, all of us know, who throw a Derby party. I think they wear hats and everything. They might make the hats. Oh yeah, in our church.
And they bet they have money on the horse.
Oh, I don't know about that.
There's people here, that have Derby parties?
Yeah, I can tell you who after if you want.
I do.
Yeah,
they get together. I want to share this
They get together. Yeah, it's a big thing for them. Huh. I don't get it, but yeah.
I don't get it.
I don't get it either. I don't know why they care.
I do know this. The one thing I do know about horse racing is that a local well-known Detroit sports radio host is huge into horse racing.
Yeah, we used to have horse racing in Toledo, but it's closed now.
Didn't Detroit used to have one too?
Yeah, probably.
Northville Downs or something like that?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Is it still? I don't know
if
it's still in existence or not.
Not sure.
Yeah. But no, it starts with, the Derby Festival starts with Thunder over Louisville. There's like another event called like the Balloon Glow, where like there's all these hot air balloons that kind of get ready because there's a big balloon race that happens every year as well. But like the weeks before, the days before, there's you go at night and you can see all these different balloons. It's really cool looking. There's like an international festival that happens in downtown Louisville. You can go to, eat a bunch of different food and stuff. And then I think the actual Derby kind of ends. But they used to have these things called Derby pins, where like that was, if you could go to any store in Louisville or the surrounding area, and it's just like a pin that you'd put on your clothes. Mm-hmm. And that was your entrance ticket. You just had to go buy a pin, and if you had the pin, you could get in.
Get into what?
All of it.
But not the race.
No, not the Derby itself, but like all the other surrounding events, like you were allowed to go in.
Can normal people go to the race, or is it like to the point like the Super Bowl? You got to be famous to get in there.
You can go. It costs a lot of money, though.
Does it?
Yeah. And I don't, that's one thing I don't understand. I don't know why so many famous people want to go to the Kentucky Derby, but it's like they show up.
It's like my sister, reason people want to go to Disney.
Well, I don't know. Just all
for the show.
Like my sister met Gene Simmons there one year and talked to him. And that was pretty cool.
How'd your sister go?
She, so it's a huge fundraiser for a lot of like schools and sports teams and stuff. Like you go and your only job is to stand in one spot and make sure that if a person tries to get past this point, just make sure they have a wristband that's a certain color. And I have a friend that was working that, and he was talking to a person that was a little lacking understanding through some things that they had ingested there, that they had the right color.
They sell marijuana brownies down there?
No, they don't have that there. Well, they have it, but they can't sell it legally. But they had the right color wristband. And he was just pleading with my friend to get into this area. And my friend kept telling him, hey, your wristband's good. You're good to go. And he's like, please let me. And please let me in. He didn't understand that he could. And so he's like, here, I'll give you $100. Just let me in. And my friend's like, okay. Sure. Deal. He took $100 and he let the guy in, even though he didn't have to.
Yeah. That's awesome.
It was great. He made $100 that day. That's my same friend that in high school, those like chocolate bar cases. that you'd carry around.
Yeah.
Where he would go to like Sam's or Costco, buy a bunch of candy bars, and tell people he was selling it for a fundraiser in school, and they would buy it, and he would make money doing that. He eventually got caught and got in trouble. He was a sneaky guy. He was funny.
The actual race is exciting though, on TV even.
Oh,
yeah, I mean 3 minutes. Yeah,
yeah, it's fast and
yeah,
they have some good trumpet players.
Mm-hmm.
You ever watch that? The opening, the trumpet guys.
probably
They're really good.
okay. It's interesting.
I have thoroughly enjoyed being able to take part in this sports-related conversation with you.
There you go. See,
There we go.
we're happy. Yeah, we're happy, dude. We should all go to a horse race somewhere. Maybe in Detroit there still is one.
I'd rather just eat Derby pie together, and
You don't want to go to a race?
No.
We can watch it.
I've never been to watch the Derby in person. I don't really want to. It doesn't sound fun.
Oh,
It would be a lot of people.
It's a lot of people.
A lot of showing off.
They're
a
all
lot
drunk.
A lot of, you
Yeah,
know.
you don't want to do it.
Yeah.
Mm-mm.
you could be the chaplain.
No, thank you.
Chaplain to the horses.
No. I'll let Greg Gilbert do that. He's a lot closer to them than I
He
am.
probably blesses the horses. Signs them with the sign of the cross.
I don't think he
cross.
does that. But, yeah.
Sprinkles them.
Just before the glue factory.
Yeah. No. Secretariat did not go to the glue factory.
No, he was a stud. He went to the stud farm.
Yeah.
And that's where all the money is made.
I literally,
in horse racing.
no joke. I'm pretty sure that they said that whenever he died, they did an autopsy and his heart was actually abnormally large.
Well, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was an amazing
Do they
animal.
have it on display anywhere?
No, athlete, right? You would say athlete. Not an amazing animal, athlete. That's how you would say it.
It's a partnership.
You go race a horse, Tim, and we'll see who's the athlete. And then you could tell
Oh, okay, we're going to do that.
You tell Secretariat,
If
you're
that's-
not an athlete.
If that's the case, then there shouldn't be any man on the greatest athlete list because all cheetahs are faster than them. All
cheetah-
orangutans could beat them in a boxing match.
An orangutan versus Mike Tyson. Now,
Orangutan
that
would kill him. He would rip Mite Tyson's arms off.
I agree.
He absolutely would.
Mike Tyson get a couple bites out of his ear first. he'd still get pummeled.
You guys are okay.
Okay, we're at 12.
I agree with you. It's not I don't think that horses are athletes.
Thank you.
I think they're very impressive, though.
They are. I'm not denying that. And as a horse, he was the greatest. Maybe. I don't know. I don't have a lot of history of horse racing.
There's a couple other famous
One
ones.
run the Triple Crown not too long ago. What was its name?
But I don't think they ran similar time as what
Probably
Secretariat
not.
did.
But that one not too long ago.
Was there a scandal with that horse though?
I think there might have been.
I think there was an illegality. Yeah, with testing or something.
Yeah, what was I'm looking it up. 13 horses have won it. American Pharaoh and Justify in 2018. American Pharaoh in 15.
They both won the Triple Crown.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
Yeah. Before that, it was 1978. And it happened pretty
Was
quick.
that Seattle Slew?
I don't know. I got rid of it. I can't find it now. I don't know. Oh, no. Affirmed. And then it was Secretariat, Seattle Slew, then affirmed. Anyways, this has nothing to do with what we're supposed to be talking about. And I got to leave.
We should
here
do
in
a
little
derby show. Yeah.
That'd be fun. I can make
It'd be
I'll
fun.
make Derby pie and bring it.
Derby pie. KFC. We could get KFC and Derby pie.
We had a conversation the other day with somebody. I guess it was Heath that was talking about how down south at KFC they sell fried chicken livers. I didn't know that they didn't do that up here.
No.
That was just a normal feature. My mom would get that every time.
Yeah, it's a Southern thing. The Derby's May 4th. So it's coming up
May the 4th.
next weekend. Not this coming weekend, the next weekend.
The day before Great Day.
Yeah, the day before the great day in the morning.
Which is also
right.
Cinco de Mayo.
Yes.
So we'll have to eat at the Mexican place.
Senorita Bonitas.
In Solon, Ohio.
Also, May
However you say
4th, there is
Solon.
a rugby tournament in Detroit. Anybody interested? You can go to
I'm
that.
I'll pass.
Okay.
I forgot May 4th is something.
Be a good evangelistic opportunity for you.
For me?
Yeah.
Why me?
You're an athlete. These guys are athletes. There's just no horses there.
I'm not an athlete anymore. One time.
Yeah. Well, this conversation just displays for us that there is a great diversity in this world, which actually has to do with our topic today as we're talking through Mark Dever and Jamie Dunlop's book,
Why Horses
Compelling Community.
Should be members of churches too.
No, I don't think they'd say that at all.
Okay.
I think they'd have a problem with that. But last time, come on, I'm trying to bring us back on track here. Last time we were talking about how community runs deep, and we were talking about the depth of commitment and its necessity for genuine community in our churches, in our church, really. And now here we're talking about how community is not simply deep, it is also broad. And what we mean by that is that it is diverse. And so I'll read this. This is a quote from the book on page 69 and 70. It says, being a Christian is more fundamental to your identity than your family, your ethnicity, your profession, your nationality, your sexuality, your personality, or any other way this world defines identity. Do we agree with that? Disagree with that? Do we feel like we need to nuance that or anything?
No, I'd agree with that. I think it goes along the lines of when we did the sermon series on, I think it was generosity. Was it generosity? And we were talking about like family, but your church family is very important, and like the importance of church family in your life, of what it should be because of what God has done for you, and He's brought you into His family, and how that rises above all other things in your life. And so I would say that, I agree with that. I mean, we can be a part of a good family. We can be a part of the best ethnicity. We could have a great profession, right? There's all these things that we could have, but in the end, in our relationship with God, it doesn't mean anything unless we're a part of His family. You know? And so that's why I would have to say I agree with that.
Yeah, our baptism proclaims that to us. And Paul says in Galatians 3, for as many of you as were baptized into Christ have put on Christ, there is neither Jew nor Greek, slave free, on and on. The point being that your baptism, we wherever we come from in the flesh in this world, whether we are a man or a woman, Jew, Greek, slave, whatever our position is, whatever our past is, we all put on Christ in the waters of baptism in a symbolic way, but still in a very true proclamatory way, that we are saying this person is now being taken out of this world because by faith they've trusted in Christ. They have been taken out of this world and now they've been put into Jesus, and that's who they are. That's your name now. Is the reality that baptism is proclaiming.
Yeah, I mean, the idea that it's not just, I don't think it'd be correct to say that it's just, these are people that you now have more in common with than your family or people in your culture, your country, your community, what school you go to. It's not that you have more in common with other Christians, it's that your fundamental identity is closer to them. What defines you and who you are, you have more in common with other Christians in that sense than you do with any other worldly concern or things that make you, so to speak.
Sinclair Ferguson, in his book on sanctification, gives these like 3 questions that I think they're really helpful for me, but I think they kind of tie into the same idea with identity, which is we need to know who we are, whose we are, and what we are for, what we're here for, our purpose. Yeah. And those 3 statements are really helpful because those are all intertwined in who am I? Who am I? Who do I belong to? Yeah. And what is my purpose here on earth? And that is who you are. And for us now as believers, all 3 of those questions are now answered by Jesus.
Yeah, well, that's good. And what our authors do in this book is they draw a conclusion. If that's true, if who we are in Christ is more fundamental to our identity than anything else, they draw a conclusion from that means that necessarily the body, the church, God's people, are naturally going to be a diverse group of people. They say, this is going to be on page 70. It's kind of just continuing the quote, really. That means that wherever gospel people exist, diversity should as well. Diversity grows naturally from the gospel, yet at the same time, diversity may be less important than you've thought, because it's not an end in itself. Diversity is the effect, not the substance. I think that's a really important quote, because I've heard trainings or speakers talk about the need to create diversity within the church, that your church should try to be diverse. And I think you've said something similar to this in the past, Spencer, that if you're trying to focus on doing something, then you're not actually going to do it. I think the point they're making here is that your diversity is just naturally created in the church. And if you focus too much on trying to create diversity, your diversity is not necessarily going to be a real diversity. It's going to be kind of manufactured and forced. It's not necessarily going to be created by the gospel and what God has done.
You're kind of putting the cart before the horse. Yeah,
and that's why we started the way we did.
That's why so we can get to that line right there. No, you're exactly right. I mean, I think they do a good job in the book of saying I thought it was fair where they pointed out that it's something we at least need to be aware of, the call for diversity. So I thought that was a fair statement. But then on the other hand, the other side is don't be so obsessed with it, because at least in my case, if I become obsessed about something, then there's a good chance I'm going to do the opposite of what I'm trying to do, and so I thought they did a pretty balanced perspective of saying diversity is something we ultimately can't create. We can't manufacture it, but we do need to be aware of it, because we're trying to balance those realities of this is something God does, but he does it through us. And so that does mean then that we have to take into consideration some of the practical things that they go into, as to just be aware within your church that could be either impeding diversity or could be potentially creating a place of fostering an environment where it can be encouraged at some level.
Yeah, diversity became a very popular thing to talk about. And I mean, at least in my own experience, maybe it was before this, but like in the late 2010s.
Yeah, it did.
Diversity became and our church members might not realize this because they're not in ministry. They're not listening to the teaching and the training and stuff like that all the time that maybe we are. But it became a hot button topic, and people were talking about it a lot, primarily as it relates to race in the church. Our country was starting to become very divided over some really hot button issues surrounding race. So this became a big topic of conversation. But diversity isn't simply about race. I mean, you can talk about diversity among different age groups, different economic status. There's diversity in political opinions that people have. There's diversity. I thought this one was funny in the book about social ability, which they clarified what they're talking about. I was like, there's some people who are kind of awkward and don't take social cues very well, but then there's people who fit in. And like that's an aspect of diversity or cultural background. And so we're not just talking about, ethnicity here. It goes bigger than just that. And something I appreciated in this chapter that they said, we've hinted at this already, but I guess just to make it explicit, is that they make pretty clear, I think, in the book that though we see that community within the church is to be diverse, we need to be careful to understand that we actually are not the ones that create diversity in the church. They say very clearly, God is the one who creates diversity in the church. Because if God is the one who is saving individuals and bringing them into the body, and God is the one bringing in different kinds of individuals from different backgrounds, he is the one who's created that diversity within the body. And so we're not the ones who are actually working for that. God is the one doing that. I think but their major point in the book is that we're not the ones trying to create diversity, but the church does at times impede diversity from taking place, I guess, if that makes sense. I think that's the the point that they're trying to make.
They do a good job of highlighting too in the book. Again, it's page 70 there, but they highlight helpfully, because the one thing is that they highlight that God has already created diversity.
Yeah.
It is a finished act. So he says here in the book, words like separated, alienated, having no hope, and been brought near is our peace has made us one and has broken it down in chapter 2 are typical. He says every single verb is descriptive. This is no aspirational language. Paul simply describes what has happened in our salvation. So for Paul, the event, the Christ event, what Christ has done 2,000 years ago on the cross and in his resurrection and ascension, has created a new humanity. He says that he might create one new man, a new human, a new race of people. And so our job is not to try to create diversity, but to live in the diversity that God has already finished and created. Now, and it's just like the same thing we talk about with sanctification, right? On the one hand, God has made us holy. On the other hand, we have to live in that holiness and maintain that holiness by seeking to live in and according with his ways. The same thing here with diversity. God has created diversity. It's finished in that sense. Now it's our role to live within the gift and the things that he's already accomplished for us.
Yeah, no, I think you're dead on. I think that's what they're trying to get across in the book here, is by recognizing you're not creating this. It's already there.
Right.
We sinfully forget about that sometimes.
Right.
And we have to be reminded about the unity we have in Christ. And there are certain things that we do, just honestly probably because of the worldly influences on our lives and on our hearts, that would get in the way or impede some of those things. You look like you were about to say something a minute ago.
It was a different way than you guys were going.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're good.
Okay.
It was good.
We need to get back on the trail here.
Back on the track.
Track or trail or
track.
Trail riders. There's diversity of horses, right? There's Shetland ponies, there's Clydesdales, there's thoroughbreds, there's quarter horses, there's the Appaloosa.
Why do you know this?
I don't know
many different horses.
I don't know any of this.
You don't know horses?
No, I don't know horses. Of course
Couldn't
not.
care less about horses.
I'm so glad that wasn't a trivia question.
You guys are a bunch of urban. I didn't even have horses, and I know that. Painted horses, right? It's kind of like the Appaloosa, the Indian.
Serenity paints horses.
Is the Indian kind the one like with like the brown and the white, like really cool patterns?
Spotted.
I like those. Those are pretty. Those are pretty.
Cool.
Yeah.
There you go. Okay.
Serenity does like horses. She rode a horse not long ago.
She did.
Does she like unicorns?
Yeah.
My daughter likes unicorns.
Those are different.
What are you talking about?
They're not real.
What are you talking about?
They're not real. Sorry.
She has a unisloth as well. A sloth that has a unicorn horn.
If she had a whale with a unicorn horn, that's more acceptable because that's actually real.
It's a narwhal.
Yeah, I know that.
I don't get what you're saying. The King James Version talks about unicorns in the Bible.
Oh, yeah. That's great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
I don't know.
So what, so let's get...
Scotland has a unicorn in its crest.
It does?
Yeah. A mythical animal. Go ahead, Tim.
What do churches do to impede diversity?
Yeah, so they list 3 different things in the book that we have listed here. So I think that churches, when they organize their ministries, and we've talked about that previously, is we could probably more accurately call them programs. They organize programs by similarity. And so like that would basically include if you age segregate your Sunday school classes or gender segregate all of your events or ministries or things like that. Or if you do it by similarity of stage in life, like young families or young adults, things like that. What you're doing when you do that is you are actively encouraging people to only be with the people that they have a lot of similarity with, things in common with. And so a church can inadvertently impede diversity within their church if they are only looking at certain demographics, I think is what they're trying to get across.
Yeah, there was some of that in the book that I didn't agree with. I don't think necessarily, because first of all, when we're thinking about diversity, right, we're thinking about a lot of things, not just race. We're thinking about age, socioeconomic status. Right, those are probably three of the bigger ones that we would find, and so. I think if you talk about that by age and similarity, because that's where our mind goes, similarity, we start to think about like stage of life. They almost came across as making that sound bad. They said we don't mean this is bad, but they talked the whole time about why it was bad. And so I think that statement of we don't think it's bad really wasn't justified in what they wrote. And I guess I don't know what type of diversity that impedes necessarily, other than, I guess I don't know, of the ages not mixing.
I think that's probably some of what they would be talking about. Or like if your church is really catering heavy to only a certain age group instead of others.
Yeah, now that's something for sure. But I mean, if you had a church who had, let's say, generational Sunday school classes, that's really encouraging all ages, that you have something for all ages. Now they're separate there. Now hopefully they're coming together for worship, right? Hopefully they have fellowships where they all come together. And so I just think you have to be careful to make it sound bad to necessarily do that. I think more along the lines of what you're saying, Scott, is you do hear churches who intentionally say, we're here to reach the next generation and that's it. Mm-hmm. And that's what their focus is. They're 100% focused on 16 to 25-year-olds. That's what they're thinking about. That's who they're trying to target. And they don't think about people who are older, or in a different stage of life. And that then is a big problem, right? That's a big problem.
I think it's easier to slip into that kind of mindset when your church has already been segregated by those things, if that makes sense. Like if you're already separating people out, and like you said, they've already said in the book before that this doesn't mean that you can never have a women's only Bible study or a youth Sunday school class or a young adults event, at your church. But I think that some of this chapter is not trying to give us hard and fast rules of what you have to do and how you have to organize things. I think the point of it is more so be aware that this can happen. If you're not intentionally thinking about how you can impede the kind of diversity within your church, then it's more likely to happen. I think that's more of what they're trying to say.
Well, they have a sentence right there that says, "What matters is what characterizes community in your church," and uses the example of the balanced plate, right? Where I think that's the question is none of those things that he lists are necessarily wrong. I mean, I wouldn't be in favor of the going for a specific homogenous group as a church necessarily. I wouldn't go for that. But like many of these ministries in themselves are not bad, right? Any of those ministries to specific groups. But if that's what characterizes our whole community as a church, we really don't have a community. We have a YMCA where people come. And you've got a place for the kids, you got the workout place for the adults, you got the seniors swim over here, the teenagers are in the basketball court over here, and then we just all go and we all dropped off and then we go. That's not really a community. That's a YMCA. And I think that's what they were trying to get at. They're not saying any of these things by themselves are bad.
I'm playing more of a pushback attitude here.
Devil's advocate is what you're trying. You're being the devil right now. Go ahead.
That's fine. Even in a family, and I think you guys will agree to this, maybe your families don't function this way, but at my family functions, especially growing up, the kids went outside and played, whatever that might be. When it was time to eat, we all got called in, and everybody ate together. All ages ate together. But then after dinner, you might sit around for a minute, but eventually the kids wanted to go outside and go swimming. The moms kind of went off, and all of a sudden they're kind of separated doing their things, and you see the men over there sitting on the couch watching football or whatever. It doesn't mean you weren't a family. It wasn't mean that you were trying to lack diversity in the family. It's just when we came together and ate, we were all together, and we enjoyed that. and now you just kind of separated. And I think that's going to be natural in a church setting, is hopefully you all come together to worship and to eat the Lord's Supper. You have fellowships that you will do that. But it's also natural that the moms are going to want to get together and the dads are going to want to get together, and people in stages of life who are going to want to get together. And there's nothing wrong with that. Now, if you start your budget to be way lopsided in a certain direction, that, yeah, you have to start talking about that, right? And thinking about that. I just read that in a way where I could see a pastor reading that and thinking, oh gosh, my church is horribly off because we have a kids group and we have a youth group and we have, a young couples class and we have this, and man, we just don't have community here. And I just fear that sometimes. I know I would have thought that probably.
I think that's a legitimate fear.
When I was younger in ministry, I definitely would have felt that way. And again, I don't think they're necessarily meaning that, but I when I was reading it, which again was a quick read, trying to go fast, that's a little bit how it came across, and they didn't really give me a good answer. It almost felt like at times like, okay, then what do you want from me? Everything we do, everybody's together all the time? But then he would say, no, that's not how we do it in our church. It's like, okay, so that's not what you're really saying. It's almost like you're yelling at me for doing what you do also, but you're saying your heart is different in the matter. I don't know. Me and Scott were talking about this a little bit before. I really think, I felt like when they were writing that, it was more specific to race diversity was what was on their mind than the others. And the reason I say that is I know that they're writing this book from Washington, D.C., where it's very easy probably to be diverse racially. In a lot of contexts, it's not as easy where you're at, But I do think it's important. Like in our setting, the age thing to me is a big deal because it's easy to get distracted by that, and trying to remind ourselves to not be, or reminding ourselves to remain diverse and what that looks like and how we can do that well, or even in gender, right? Not to just be separated men and women all the time, but to come together and to be together. I guess I just think about that stuff a little more, and so maybe that's what jumped out at me. There.
Yeah, and they use plenty of race examples in the chapter, so I think you're well founded in thinking that was probably a big thought on their mind. And I agree. I think sometimes the way that the authors wrote the book, it does sound very, I don't know, what you call it, like a very clear black and white. They talk in very black and white terms many times, and so if you don't read it discerningly, that's part of the reason why I like the fact that we're talking through it, is that we can bring that up and kind of talk through that and think through those things.
I mean, they did mention, together. I don't think did we mention the different boundaries that they mentioned on page 74?
I didn't. Nope. Go ahead.
But it's not just, race. They say boundaries of age, boundaries of economics, boundaries of politics, boundaries of social ability, boundaries of cultural background. These were ones that they were. Yeah. We just didn't say it, did we?
Yeah, he did.
I actually did say that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm sorry.
That's right. You weren't.
I forgive you.
No, I was listening.
We have to have diversity. Some people listen. Some people don't.
I was still thinking about the horse thing and frustrated.
You're still thinking about horses.
Anyway,
whoa, boy.
When was this book written?
2015. Which, by the way, I mean, because they talk about consumerism as another thing, and then the one that I thought was helpful, because it's actually again, they apply it specifically in their context to race, the invisibility of the majority culture. One of the things that was interesting is they mentioned George Zimmerman.
I know, yeah.
Which I'm like, that
felt like forever ago.
Was that Trayvon Martin? Was that the Trayvon Martin situation where Trayvon Martin was the African-American young man that was...
It might have been, yeah.
Because that was whenever... I mean, I remember that was a major incident.
Was that in Missouri?
No, the Trayvon Martin thing was in Florida. St. Louis had
there was
it
one
Brown?
There, there was one
was
there.
Was it Michael
too.
Brown?
I just remember, yeah.
Something like that. Was a really big one in Ferguson.
Yeah.
Remember Ferguson?
Right,
yeah. St. Louis, yeah. Yeah, those things, I think the invisibility of the majority culture.
You said it went to George Zimmerman.
Well, I was saying because we talked about the race thing, and that it was just crazy to me because when the book was written in 2015, that was a huge issue, and it's just George Floyd hadn't happened,
and that was really just the beginning.
That was just the beginning, and I was like, wow, there's so much that's happened since they first wrote this book because that's their example. One of the things they said there that I think we can apply across the board, though, they said, for instance, they said, for instance, prayers, right? I thought this was helpful. They said, if a young man goes up in front and leads people in prayer all the time, he's only praying about young man's struggles. And so maybe there's a sense in which we need to I was just thinking, potentially that means you invite older men to come up and pray at certain times, or maybe you talk to them and you ask them, what are some things that we could pray about? Just trying to be aware. Another thing they use, I don't know, did they use that here where they talked about having music that's accessible, that's simple to be accessible to all? They mentioned that, I believe, in one of them.
I think he talked about that.
That was the previous point. They say there are churches that endeavor to make musical style as simple as possible to
you'll
be
have
as
like
accessible.
A traditional service, a contemporary service, and how that's separating and not allowing diversity.
Right, so you got different types of music. Instead, they're saying we try to make it as simple as possible so it's as accessible to as many people as possible. And I think one of the things I really appreciated they did there, the tail end, was they mentioned that some African-American members of their church felt uncomfortable or were concerned in light of what happened with the George Zimmerman, Trayvon Martin case.
When he was found not guilty.
Yeah, or for whatever happened there. Because
that's what he said.
And I thought it was helpful in the sense that they didn't go in, because sometimes we as Christians can think the solution that we have to do is to try to analyze exactly what happened in that incident and make a decree. Instead, what they did was, the point was, this obviously impacted you. Regardless of whatever happened, you're obviously impacted by it. So we can at least pray for the impact that's happening to certain people in our church. Because, like he was saying, there were white people in their church that didn't impact them as much. Yeah. And so I thought that was a helpful way to approach it, to say, at the very least, all we can agree is they're at least concerned about this. I may not be able to completely understand that. That doesn't mean I'm right or they're wrong or whatever, but it does mean we can pray for them because they're feeling this way. And we know that God cares, and God is the ultimate source of truth in the midst of a chaotic and confused and sinful world. And I thought that was helpful.
Of the three ways that they mentioned that we can and by our own effort can hinder diversity, they did the ministry by similarity, the consumerism, which we talked a lot about in the last podcast, but the third one, the invisibility of the majority culture, which you were just talking about there, Spencer. For our church here, this is me talking from my own experience, I think that's a big one. Of when you have a church that's been established for a long time, and there's the in crowd, the people who have been here, that have relationships here, it can be very difficult to see unique nuances of the church culture, because to the people who have been here for a long time, that's just the way church is. That's how you do church. But then when you have a new person come in to the church, they're like, well, that's not how we did church. Like, that's not how this worked at our church. And so there's a lot of assumptions that can get made about the way you build relationships here, or the way things are supposed to happen, or the way you're supposed to act here. And it's to the majority group, I'm not talking racially, to the majority group within a church, they're kind of ignorant of that culture because it's what they swim in, it's what they exist in. And so again, not saying the majority culture there is wrong. Right. I think that's important to say. It's not that it's wrong. But I think the point they're trying to make in that section is the majority needs to be aware that it's there, that might be other newer people might be seeing it this way or interacting with it this way. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we had that recently with you. Remember, you were talking about Chuck E. Cheese.
Yeah,
what's that?
What'd you say?
Mr. Gaddy's.
Yeah, and you started talking about this Mr. Gaddy's, assuming that we all knew exactly what you were talking about.
Yeah.
And we're like, what is Mr. Gaddy's? And you're like, what do you mean, what is Mr. Gaddy's? It's just like Chuck E. Cheese. I think you said it's like Chuck E. Cheese, blah, blah, blah. And we're like, I've never heard of that in my life, you know? But you just assumed it was normal because you had them where you lived. Yeah. We don't have them where we live. And it's kind of the same thing you're talking about here is you just start to assume this is how churches. I always go to Lord's Supper, the way churches do Lord's Supper, because I remember as a kid, this is how we did Lord's Supper. The deacons all wore suits, and the deacons all went up there in a procession, and they were handed the plate by the pastor, who then they went and handed, the different elements to the congregation, and then they individually handed their plate back to the pastor. Then they all stood there for a while until the pastor said, "You can now sit down," and then they would sit down, and then the pastor would hand each one of them the element, and I'm like, this is exactly how it needs to be done. And the first time I went somewhere else and they were doing Lord's Supper, is like, they're doing it very different. How are you supposed to do it?
Or I remember, like, why are they doing this wrong?
Yeah, and I'm just like, this is weird and awkward, but we don't really have in the Bible how you do that. It just says to do it.
I wish they wore white gloves. Wouldn't that be awesome as they serve the Lord's Supper?
They do that when they play the bells.
The white
Yeah, that's for the bells.
Did you do the bells growing up?
No, I never did the bells. It was here, though.
Scott, you should bring that back for the youth. I bet they would really get into it.
We sold the bells.
Yeah, we had bells. We got rid of them all.
We got rid of them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But that's another one, right? But as a kid, I thought this is how it has to be done, and because that's just the culture I was in. That was just how our church did it. And you don't necessarily see your faults, probably. You don't see your and then when something needs to be changed, you're like, no, this isn't how church is done, and working through all of that. And that's why it's important what you have written down here, that they said just the no hard and fast rules, but the main thing is to be self-aware. And that's important, is trying to be self-aware in your context of where you are, is we are a church in the United States, and we're in Michigan, and we're in Monroe County specifically. We're very close to like Toledo. And so we have a certain context that we need to be aware of and know. And so because of that, some things might be different here, but also doesn't necessarily mean what somebody's doing in Florida is wrong because they don't do it how we do it, or we're wrong because we can't do what they're doing. And just being self-aware of our natural failures, I guess. I think about that too. Like, I'm sure my theology isn't 100% right. I like to think it is, and I pray that God would help me to see maybe where it's not correct. And just in knowing that, I think it gives you a little more grace for others who might not see eye to eye with you theologically in certain areas, right? To say, well, I need to give some grace here, honestly, because, I think I'm right. I've tried to study this, but there's a chance I'm not, But that's being self-aware and really putting everything through the lens of Scripture, again, of why do we do the things we do, what is necessary, what isn't necessary, what are we willing to die about, what are we not willing to die about. It comes down to those things. And I think when you have a church who's actively asking those questions, diversity probably will flow a little more out of that, because you're going to be a little more open at times to things. Yeah. But you're also going to be more aware of everybody. Yeah. And I think that's also a pastoral quality that is necessary, because the three of us, we're at a certain age. And so we can't go up there and just do prayers based off of our family life. You know what I mean? Like that young guy who goes up and prays. It's our job as pastors to think about the people who are in that stage of life where they're probably in their final 10 years of life. They have not just great-grandkids, but maybe great-great-grandkids. We have to think about the people just entering being grandparents, hitting retirement age, even though we're not there. A good pastor is going to be self-aware and think through those, and also seek counsel, kind of like you said, Spencer, right? Of the older people in the congregation, to talk to them and try to gain insight to them, but also to gain insight from the teenagers. Talk to them. What are they going through? What are they experiencing? Because it's easy to forget about them and just to move on, and not in your messages talk about what it must be like in school, and to face these different things. I think it's the preacher's job, the pastor's job, to really think through all of those things, and we can't do it perfectly, but that takes being very, very self-aware.
Yeah, I think it's actually in the next chapter they're going to talk a lot about the role of preaching in the creation of community. I think a really helpful question that you can ask yourself about this third way of how you can, the majority culture is kind of invisible to the majority, is if you ever have the opportunity, don't just do this on a Sunday, but if you ever have the opportunity, go to a different church on a Sunday morning and just be very mindful of what it feels like to be a brand new person at a place where you've never been before. And just try to take note of what do you notice, right? Is the first thing that you notice a dirty, hallway, or a full trash can, or just the way the church does greeting time, or
doesn't.
If you're Spencer, or ask, like, were you welcomed? Did somebody talk to you, and how did that feel? Or did you get bombarded by people talking to you, and how did that make you feel? And so normally, if you don't experience...
Tim's not a good person to ask that question.
No, I'm not talking to Tim.
Yeah, I was going to say, most other
questions you're asking, I'm like,
no. But it's like, when you go visit, if you've been going to the same church for 10 years, and you've not gone to a different church on a Sunday morning, you probably don't notice the same things at your church that a brand new person does. You don't notice them. The things that maybe did bother you 10 years ago just don't bother you anymore because you've just accepted this is just the way it is. But it makes an impression on the people who come for the first time. And they experience something, and it's going to be a bigger deal to them. And so things get set up in your church the way that the majority are comfortable with it. That's just what happens. And so just ask yourself, how does a brand new person experience my church? What do they see? What do they notice? What do they experience? Or look around and see, is everybody at my church look the same, talk the same, have similar jobs? I actually think that we have a pretty diverse church in terms of many of those things here at our church, but I just think that's a helpful exercise people can do sometimes. I don't know if that makes sense or not. You look like
it does. It does. And as I've said before, I mean, I'm someone, when I go to somebody else's church, I give much more grace to that church. Honestly. I mean, like, if I see things and it's kind of out of order, I'm just like, well, they're doing the best they can, I'm sure. And when I listen to the music and it's not good, I'm like, yeah, but at least they're up there doing it and they're trying to sing a joyful song to the Lord. And you see the pastor up there and maybe he's not as put together as you would want. And I'm like, yeah, but who knows? Maybe this, he's a bivocational job. I don't know. I don't know what's going on in his life. I tend to be a little more critical of my own,
Oh, we know.
Yeah. But no, I think you're right. That's a good exercise. That is a good exercise to do and to see. And I even try to go a little further of, like, what if I were to walk into a church in Bulgaria? What if I was going to walk into a church somewhere in Argentina, and just try to think about that stuff too? What if somebody from there walks into here? But again, that's thinking of people outside the church. I think most of the time we are to think about the people inside our church. Yes, we need to share the gospel with those outside. Yeah. But there's dangers too where you can get lost in just thinking about them outside. And we're not saying that by any means, but yeah, that's a good practice and a good exercise of what you said there. But we pray and we trust that God will help our church to be diverse as He wants it to be, that we are self-aware, and that we're not doing anything to get in the way of that. We don't want to do that, and so hopefully we can do that the best we can.
I think diversity sounds good on paper, but diversity is honestly really hard in a church because you have to end up putting up with people who are different from you. You have to have maybe hard conversations, or like one of the things they actually talked about in this chapter was that to have a diverse church requires you to make sacrifices of your own preferences at times, and that's not easy. And so diversity is one of those things that's easy to talk about, but really hard to do, and that's why we cannot do it without the Lord and His power, and it's why it is a sign that the community if it's diverse in your church, is not being created by your own efforts. It's being created by God and what he's doing among you, and it's a reason to praise him and be thankful. So, but good job. I don't really have anything else to talk about with horse racing or Mr. Gaddy's or anything else like that. But hope you guys stuck with us.
If we keep talking about it, it's going to be like we're beating a dead horse.
Oh, darn. And on that note,
classic.
Did you get that, Tim?
I did. You said horse.
Horse.
I like Spencer's little chuckles.
I laugh at myself because I'm the only one who gets my jokes.
We get it. No,
my wife.
We're right there.
My wife hates it. She thinks it's dumb.
Sorry.
But I love her. All right. Take care.